Code of Rue, Part 5. The Sorcerer King had lost. Morgock's faces took on the slack look of the grave. He watched Varog smolder and melt, and even the routine glee at a rival vanquished was beyond him. Grimy yellow torchlight and phosphorescent green flames sizzling in midair reflected in the Orc Warlock's blurred eyes. They turned toward Hellscream and, one by one, made mocking attempts at a salute, and Morgock saw movement behind them. In the thiel-scented muck that the warsong fighting pits had become, Kolroth was slowly, dazedly struggling to his feet, body scorched, skin hanging off in shreds. For a second, the Imperator's foot tapped in anticipation of attempting the impossible. He reached one arm toward the artifact. He had already failed. There was no risk in gambling with Heimal's corpses. The gray stone of the artifact burned hot where he touched it. He had only known this magic's likes for seconds, but perhaps that would be enough to parrot, to imitate. Clenching his teeth, the Sorcerer King drew in as gingerly as if he was scraping a mural onto splintering wood. Thin lines of green fire began to etch themselves on Kolroth's skin, rasping across his body, threatening to peel away his life. Morgock's inscriptions crossed over a blue, rune-scarred patch of flesh, and the breaker screamed in pain, sinking back down in the sand. With wolfish swiftness, the orc prisoner turned. One pointed a cruel, long-fingered hand at the breaker. Morgock's heart dropped, harder this time for the tiny hope of reprieve, as the frothing bright flames shot out again, wrapping around Kolroth like a robe. Morgock pulled the flow of his inscription upward blindly toward his starting point. He couldn't see Kolroth. His finger hung outstretched. Then the flames floated off, vanishing into the air. Two schools of magic. The breaker was now immune to both. It was impossible, until it wasn't. Gradually, as Morgock held blistering air in his lungs, Kolroth's shadow stretched along the wall of the pit, looming over the orcs. He stood up straight, his markings now blue and green beneath dark burns. The Sorcerer King's hasty inscriptions were visible on his body, mingling with runes like writing in ash. Teeth gritted and eyes frantic, the breaker advanced on the orcs. Burst after burst of blazing green energy evaporated against his skin. Kolroth's weapon had been destroyed, so he fell upon his enemies bare-handed, crushing them beneath his girth, breaking their paper-thin bodies, pounding them to reddish-black pulp with his hands and elbows like stalactites. One of the orc prisoners fell back from the avalanche, consuming his fellows. Abandoning his spells, he grabbed a weapon from the ground, swinging it about in an attempt to ward off the gigantic ogre. Stepping away from the gore in his wake, Kolroth let the bite of the pitted steel find his shoulder, barely breaking skin. He gripped the orc's skull in one fist, squeezing and twisting. The prisoner's hands scrabbled and clawed, trying to find purchase anywhere sensitive, anywhere that would loosen the grapple. But he was too small. Slowly, agonizingly, the orc's eyes began to protrude out, distenting past his brows. The breaker treated his audience to the sound of crackling wood, and then, with a final shake, flickered his burden to the ground. As the orcs of the Iron Horde roared their approval, the breaker held a single fist, bloody with the access of victory, toward his Imperator. Morgock folded his arms against his chest. Grommash Hellscream looked joyed and alive as he shouted along with the other orcs. Across the pit, he yelled,
"Soon, our warriors will ignore warlock magic."
And the cheers grew.
"Congratulations, Imperator. You may be able to use your clan after all."
He turned to the scar-faced messenger, speaking loud enough for Morgock to hear.
"Send word to the army. End the slaughter. The Heimal are servants of the Iron Horde."
The scattered cheers took minutes to fade. The Heimal servants, they would change, on pain of death. But Grommash had called Morgock by his title. He was king still. Hellscream's voice, close by, snapped the Imperator from his thoughts.
"I know that you have many slaves in your city."
Because he had to, Morgock leaned down to answer.
"Yes." "You will deliver any orcs to Kargath Bladefist. They are now members of the Shattered Hand clan. If you speak against me, if you dare to rebel."
Grommash sneered as he walked past.
It will be Highmall slaves I send for your blood.
The Imperator did not respond. As the orcs filtered away from the pit, Morgock saw Kolroth approaching with a weary, self-satisfied smile on his hairless face. The smile of one who knew not only that he had achieved, but that he would achieve again.
Imperator,
He saluted.
Kolroth.
Morgock did not raise his hand in congratulations. The breaker hardly noticed. He was elated.
Imperator, I think I can do it again.
Morgock snorted.
Do what? Become immune to even more magic. I see. And when would you have told me this hidden talent, Kolroth?
Kolroth seemed confused.
I did not.
Morgock hit him. Hard, in the face, crunching bone, knocking him backward. Sudden fury boiled up from the very core of the Imperator's being. Flecks of spit flew from his mouth as he pummeled Kolroth in the head, chest, shoulders, blows cascading down like hail. His fist ached. The breaker, on his knees, raised both hands to cover his face, but didn't strike back. His eyes were fearful, then dismayed. Then, when it became clear Morgock would not hit him any longer, hateful, he drooled a bloody white tooth into the dust. Morgock ignored him, windled. He pulled his hoods off, scratched the clammy bald crowns of his heads. Spotting the scar-faced messenger, calmly filling her pack with provisions, Morgock snapped at her.
Take him to your healers.
He indicated Kolroth with a quick twist of his hand. The messenger smirked. She said nothing, gave him no other acknowledgement, continued idly lacing up her road boots.
No!
Morgock roared. She glanced at Morgock, mildly annoyed, as if his voices were simply too loud. After a second, she turned back around. He watched, seething, as she walked off alone. Morgock's balcony was quiet. The stone slumbered. He had added 2 more to his throne room since returning from Gramashar. With service to the Iron Horde came the ability to roam Nagrand with greater impunity, at least for the orcs. Surely Gramash had him watched, but would he begrudge a few rocks so long as his armies were trained? The orcs were learning the principles of magic immunity slowly. In all likelihood, it would take years, and years could be stretched to generations. Morgock would command Kolroth to teach 2 ogres for every orc. Varog's spot on the council stood vacant, to be filled when Morgock deigned to. He would choose a replacement who presented no risk at all. The 2 hulking, necklace ogron, evolutionary steps between ogres and mud, who stood guard outside his halls were too dumb to disobey. It was refreshing. Morgock would wait. He would endure the Iron Horde. Gramash Hellscream knew only how to charge into battle, to kill. The war chief would never stamp out the traditions of the Highmall clan while they were useful. He was merely the warrior with the greatest weapon. What did he know of empire? Nothing. The Iron Horde called them servants, and Morgock's people would serve. They would appease Hellscream, make a lie of their size, for now. It was even possible for a king to play at peasantry if he kept his crown hidden. End of part 5.